We believe that UFOs are real. We believe that extraterrestrial intelligence is probably the most important single reality to the entire experience that we're ever going to have. And we have to stop being intimidated. I mean, the post-World War II generation has suffered through the most protracted adolescence in the entire history of the human family. And this concept that we haven't grokked the fact that we are all grown-ups now. I mean, as strange as that sounds, I mean, I'm 50 years, I'm going to be 50 years old this next month, and I still refer to all of us in my peer group as, oh, let's get the kids together and we'll do this and that, you know? I mean, you know, and that's just a reality. We have to come to grips with the fact that we are grown-ups now, and that it's time for us to define the reality that is going to obtain for the next millennium. And UFOs, the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence, and the relationship that we are going to have with these civilizations is an overwhelmingly important reality. And that for people who are kind of clinging and holding, kind of sliding down the hill now of crying out that you can't do this, you've got to stop doing this, you are a fool, you know, we're going to deprive you of any kind of recognition, we're going to take away your credentials as a tenured teacher, we're going to take away your license as a practicing psychiatrist, we'll take away your license as a lawyer, you know, if you try to do this kind of stuff. So the more they try to strip us down and take away the things that they have tried to bribe us with to stay attached to their worldview, the better it is. You know, now this is a spiritual message that has been around for a millennia. That if you can get yourself unattached to the things that they offer you in exchange for your cowardice, in exchange for your not coming forward and being willing to talk about the things that are the most important things that you've ever thought of, then you have lost your soul. And it's time for us to not only grow up, but it's time for us to realize our soul's mission. And I believe that it is to reach out into contact and have a relationship with extraterrestrial intelligence. I remember the moment in my life when things like this began to be important to me. And I was like about 5 years old, and I was sitting on my lawn in Fort Anne, New York, and it was getting nighttime, and it was the stars were just starting to come through. And I remember that I was sitting there, and as it got darker and darker, and I was looking up into the stars, I started realizing what the stars were. That the stars are not little twinkly lights in the sky. That this level of consciousness that goes on our planet considers them to be, paying virtually no attention to them. But that these are star systems, our entire star systems, and indeed other galaxies, some of them. And I remember sitting there, and I began that night a process of trying to then get out every single night that I could and to sit and watch the stars appear, and how the world changed at that point, away from the kind of hustle and bustle and apparent reality of our everyday lives into an entirely different, more contexted reality. And I would each night pick out a star and just sit there as it pulsed its energy to us, and I would reflect upon. It wasn't even really, I guess the important thing is I wasn't reflecting even upon it. I was experiencing the fact that there were planets around this star, and that there were people on the planets. And it just, the being in the presence of that reality began to transform my life. And it transformed my life in a way that has caused me to do what I do. Because it's perfectly obvious that this is what you would do. And it isn't obvious to people who don't think like that and be in the presence of the other beings in our universe. Because we get trapped in a completely artificial reality structure. We get trapped in a sub-reality structure. That we live within a given nation state, that there are boundaries around us, that we have to, dig up metals and form them into bullets and shoot hot lead into other people's bodies to keep them from coming across our lines. And that the artificiality of that is so hard to maintain if in fact one just gets out each night and watches the stars come into our lives. And to realize what's really true instead of this artificial reality. And it was just an exercise that I would do each night. And as I moved on through that process of growing up, I was just not buying the sub-reality structures. I just couldn't get excited about the idea of going and killing other people to protect our country, to make our country the most powerful and dominant force in the world. I couldn't quite grok why that was such a big deal, why we should be doing that. And it was very clear to me that what I wanted to do was to participate in getting to establish communication or communion with these other beings. Because it was so clear to me that that was important for us as a people to know about and to experience. Because it was so important to me to experience. Yet whenever I would start talking with anybody about it, I would get this very peculiar reaction. That people would all just go, right, drugs. Right. And, this was all pre-drugs, right? And so it was funny. I had decided, I was trying to figure out what the best way of spending one's life was that would facilitate getting to talk about that. And getting to get people to understand this and to facilitate the communication with these beings. At first I thought I was going to be an astronomer. And I said, well, I get to be an astronomer and I'd get to do all this. And, well, you had to just look through these telescopes and then you should mainly take pictures and then analyze pictures. And I said that wasn't very exciting. And finally it dawned on me that the way to do it was to be an astronaut. I could be an astronaut and I get to go out there and get to talk with them and get to try to meet them. And so I went upon this path of becoming an astronaut and did all the stuff, I learned what I was supposed to learn and had to study all the special stuff in school, and I applied to the Air Force Academy, that I was going to be an Air Force officer and be a pilot and be an astronaut. And I eventually was number one in the competition for the appointment from our congressman in northern New York, where I grew up. And so I thought this was great. And so I got to be the number one candidate in our congressional district. And fortunately, I ended up being the number one candidate in the state of New York. So much to my surprise, I got to go talk to the senators as well as the congressman about going and getting the appointment, because they give 2 senatorial appointments for New York. So I went down, and Kenneth Keating was going to be interviewing me on behalf of Kenneth Keating and Jacob Javits. And Kenneth Keating said to me, well, Mr. Sheehan, why do you want to go to the Air Force Academy? And I said, well, here I was sitting here at this United States Senator's office, you know, and I said, well, I'd better be honest. That's always the best policy, be completely honest, not realizing what politicians really were at that point. And so I said, well, I want to be a pilot to learn to fly because I want to be an astronaut. And he said, well, why do you want to be an astronaut? And I said, because I want to be part of getting to meet the extraterrestrial civilizations. And there was this big, long silence. Kenneth Keating gave me this strange look. And he actually did. He actually said, what? So I got to say it twice. So I said, I want to be an astronaut so that I can participate in getting to meet the extraterrestrial beings. And he was still kind of looking at me funny, so I figured I better explain a little further. I said, so we can find out all the stuff that they have learned. I said that some of them may be millions of years in advance of us with their technology and their spirituality. And as I kept on going, I wasn't quite sure whether I was helping my cause any. Well, and I'm still not certain. I'm still not certain because his reaction was he became totally disarmed. And he said, well, Danny, he said, look, I wouldn't have normally told you this, he said, but I've already committed for political reasons to have to give the appointment, the senatorial appointment, to someone else. He said, but you're number one in the congressional district. He said, you're number one in the state. He said, so you go back and you can get the appointment to the Air Force Academy from your congressman. But he said, look, if you want, I'll give you the appointment to the United States Naval Academy. He said, you can become an astronaut by being a Navy pilot and stuff like that. I said, boats. I said, I'm not into boats. I said, I'm into airplanes. I want to fly. I want to fly airplanes and get to be an astronaut. I said, but you know, I don't want to have to spend 4 years doing boats. And he said, but he said, I just want to make it clear to you. He said, I'll give you the appointment to the Naval Academy if you want it, and you can be an astronaut through that. But he said, I'm sure that you go back to the congressional district in Carlton King, will give you the appointment. And so I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so I went back and went to meet with Carlton King, and Carlton King gave the appointment to the kid who was number 7 in the congressional competition, who turns out to have been the son of the mayor of Glens Falls. I was flabbergasted. I was completely flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that all the promises that we'd been made, all the things that we've been told about our government, about how it worked and how if you work really hard and you achieve everything that you can get to do what you want, I was flabbergasted. And I said, I'll have to become a lawyer. I'll have to become a lawyer to work for a while to make the system work. Because this is outrageous that somebody could put that kind of short-term, narrow-minded political self-interest over and above my getting to meet with the extraterrestrial people. I couldn't believe that. And so I did. I said, okay, I'll be a lawyer then.
I'm joined by constitutional trial attorney Daniel SHEEHAN. Daniel is one of the most influential public interest lawyers in the country. He's worked on a number of cases, including the Pentagon Papers case and the Karen Silkwood case that have changed the course of American history. In 1980, he founded the Christic Institute, where he served as general counsel and chief trial attorney. Daniel has also served as chief trial attorney for the Romero Institute and the chief trial counsel for the ACLU's Rocky Mountain States chapter. His new book, The People's Advocate, The Life and Legal History of America's Most Fearless Public Interest Lawyer, is a must-read for anyone who wants to know the inside story of some of the most important trials of the past half-century. Daniel SHEEHAN, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks so much for being with us. I'm curious, what got you interested in the law in the first place? Let's start with you, Daniel. What drew you into this, and then what got you into this kind of law?
Well, Actually, Tom, originally back in 1963, when I graduated from high school, I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. And it turns out that I was #1 in the competition for New York State for the senatorial appointment. But Jacob Javits, the United States Senator, actually gave the appointment to the son of one of his major financial contributors. And so I went back to the congressional district to get the congressional district appointment. And that congressman gave the appointment to the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls. And so I was completely freaked out that the rules didn't seem to be working. It struck me that the system was out of tune. So I decided I would become a lawyer and spend some time helping to tune the system to get it back into tune. But the more time I spent being a lawyer, the more I realized that the system wasn't really out of tune. It's just that it was playing a completely different song from that which we had been told when we were in high school and studying civics. So I decided I was going to be a lawyer, and I became a civil rights lawyer. Helped found the Civil Rights Law Review at Harvard, Harvard Law School, and went on to practice in this particular area at that time from 1968, that sort of halcyon year, when I was the editor of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, all the way on through. And while I was there, I actually initiated the case that went to the United States Supreme Court to establish the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. And because of that, I was hired by the #1 law firm on Wall Street that represents NBC. And there I was there when we received the Pentagon Papers. So I became intimately involved in the initial decisions to decide whether to publish the papers, and if so, what was going to happen with the Nixon administration. And so I went into doing that and was in all of the closed-door hearings with the judges and all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I was one of the few the lawyers that was deeply involved in that all the way to the end. And from there I went to F. Lee Bailey's office, and I was there when he was retained to represent James McCord in the Watergate burglary. So I ended up finding out about what was exactly going on, what caused the Watergate burglary, what was behind the Watergate burglary. And because of that, I left and went back to Harvard to go to divinity school. After having finished Harvard College in '67, Harvard Law School in '70, in 1973 I went back to Harvard Divinity School and studied the origins of natural law and the relationship of natural law to the Constitution of the United States. And so that's how I ended up in this particular specialized area of the law.
That's remarkable. I mean, you've been at the pivot point of so many major American historical. It's the thing that makes your book so amazing. The People's Advocate. It's almost Forrest Gump-like, except that you were intentional about all this stuff. You know, you were being driven.
Yeah, that's right.
by,